Hello and welcome. I am Tiberius, and today I'm continuing my interview series about getting into cybersecurity. I'm joined by Joe Helle, also known as the Mayor, a nod to him having served as a duly elected mayor in Ohio. In addition to his political history, Joe has served in the armed forces, as a paramedic, and as a pen tester and chief operating officer at TCM Security. He's written a number of hacking tools, courses, and discovered several zero-day vulnerabilities. Joe, welcome to my channel, and thank you for being here to share your knowledge and experiences with us.
Hey, how you doing?
Awesome, thank you. So, as I mentioned in the intro, you have quite a diverse background, including service as an Army Airborne Infantry Sergeant, a mayor, and now as a cybersecurity professional. What motivated you to transition into cybersecurity, and what skills from your previous vocations do you feel most helped?
Yeah, so I lost a legislative race in Ohio in 2018, and just with how toxic politics was getting, I decided I would try yet another career change, and kind of just had to do an inventory of things I might be good at. When you're starting over again at basically 33, it can be kind of daunting. So started looking at computers. I think we all have decades of computer experience at this point. Anybody who's been born from pretty much the 70s on. And I started looking for positions and things that might be exciting or something to pivot into. So started looking at IT jobs. I got an A+, got accepted to WGU onto the cybersecurity program back in 2019, back when it was still pretty new, and started digging in from there. When it comes to skills, I think from my military time, just discipline and kind of not taking no for an answer, knowing that the mission comes first, and chasing down problem solving as part of the job for everything we do in cybersecurity is huge. So bringing that from my military experience, plus as being a paramedic with kind of the curiosity and problem solving aspect of that, and then bringing all the soft skills that come from being an elected official. So talking to people and being able to have good conversations despite being severely introverted like I am, and some of those things.
Awesome. You earned both a bachelor's and a master's degree in cybersecurity and information assurance from WGU, I believe. Do you feel like getting a degree gave you any kind of edge when trying to find your first cybersecurity role?
I'm not convinced it did. I think that degrees in cybersecurity and degrees in IT in general they're inching nearer and nearer to that resume bullet rather than something that may help you leverage yourself above somebody else. And I think that the space in general has a lot of that issue, to where the more somebody has of something, the less economic value it has in terms of competition, amongst your peers or amongst other folks who are trying to get jobs. That said, I think the bachelor's degree program I did was spectacular. I came out with a whole bunch of certifications and a lot of knowledge. So I think there are benefits. But, in terms of competitiveness, when you're competing against other people trying to get a job, I question the value, outside of just, does this person have a degree, yes or no?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, like back in the day, it was sort of the differentiator. So when I entered the industry, it was almost you kind of had to just have a degree. But yeah, nowadays this is kind of the point of this interview series, honestly. Like, there are so many different ways to get into cybersecurity. And while sometimes, a degree is nice to have on a resume, it's not like you're going to get marked down in like the candidate process for not having one, as long as you can balance everything sort of with other stuff.
I think that depends where we get into the resume process too. If you have somebody who is submitting your resume on your behalf, whether that be a recruiter or somebody that works internally, I think you're going to have a better shot than somebody who's trying to get in past the resume reader, whether that's a person or the automated process, because they're just looking to weed out hundreds of thousands at times, resumes and applicants who are coming through. So really, I think it depends what door you're trying to go in. Also, if you're going through the front door, I think you're probably going to need it. If you're trying to break in the side, somebody's leaving a stone there for you to walk in the side of the building, I think you're a little bit better off without a degree, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why networking is so important, and why I always recommend people at least go to, one local con if you can, just to, get your name out there and meet people in the industry. Because, it is one of those situations where if you know people, they know you. So, they'll think of you if they have a position coming up, even if you don't technically meet the requirements that are posted online.
Yep. Yeah. The majority of my success in this field has come because I've communicated with somebody who was a decision maker versus, getting in through the applicant process.
Awesome, man. So in addition to your degrees, I believe I counted at least 19 tech and cybersecurity certs on your LinkedIn profile. Which is super impressive, by the way. Which cert did you consider the most valuable for newcomers to get? And also on a personal level, which cert did you enjoy getting the most?
Yeah, so the one I think if you're going to get into cybersecurity specifically, Security Plus, hands down. If you're coming in without experience or knowledge, just the way it's broken down, basically on a terminology basis, I think is something that everybody needs. Do you need to get the certification to learn that? No. Could you go pick up like Professor Messer's notes or, watch his videos? Absolutely. And you can get the terminology without taking the exam. But I do think that within the industry, there is a baseline of some sort where you really do have to have some kind of, you have to be able to quantify what you know. And, something like a Security Plus does a good job of qualifying your baseline kind of knowledge. When it comes to exams, and certifications in general, the EJPT from the old eLearn Security is still the only one I've ever failed. It was my first offensive exam. I got so frustrated in it. Back then, you got like 3 attempts if you purchased their premium exam, whatever it was. So I had 3 attempts. So I got so frustrated and I was so tired because I was up like 19 hours trying to work on it. It clicked all the multiple choice buttons, seeing if I could whiff it. I failed. I went to bed, woke back up and did it the next day. So it's my first one, my first hands-on exam I ever did. Probably the one I'm still proudest of because it really solidified that, hey, I want to get into this. It just showed me that everything I'm going to do in this field is going to be frustrating and just kind of live with it.
Awesome. But is that would you say that's the one that you enjoyed the most? Because that sounds like it's the one you didn't enjoy the most almost.
I enjoy taking exams just to, I don't know if it's kind of just an internal thing. I don't want to call it an ego thing by any means. A lot of those certifications came from WGU because of the bachelor's and master's programs. So Network Plus, Security Plus, I've had SSCP in the past. CEH, I think, was part of it, and some other ones. A lot of those certifications came as part of the program. Some of them you had to do to pass a course. Some of them were optional. Why you wouldn't take them if they're optional is beyond me. So I took as many as I could. In regards to the ones I think were the most fun, the ones that were the old Pen Tester Academy, which is now Altered Security with Nikhil Mitt, those are probably my favorites. So, like the CRTP exam, by far the one I think had the most impact on my career and the one that I've certainly enjoyed the most.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I mean, I do not do Active Directory stuff in my day job at all, but I got the chance to take that exam, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It's an awesome course. And, if I'm doing, like, I try to get people to do internals on Windows from a Windows device because I've found so much success doing it. And that being, almost completely a PowerShell course. It was just huge. And had I not done that course, like I wouldn't have had the level of knowledge and that stuff that I do.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we can talk about the exam much at all, but I just like how basically it was one thing after another. Everything you found sort of opened up different things. Yeah. That was a really enjoyable part, as opposed to sort of here are 5 hosts, you try and get as many as you can, sort of thing. So it was very, very much a progressive exam in that sense.
Yeah, and it was very pragmatic to me. The point wasn't to get you stuck anywhere. It was, I've taught you the material. Let's see how well I've done. And I felt like that through the entire exam. I think there was one hang up where it felt less like an exam of what we've taught you. And there was a little bit of capture the flaggy stuff to it. But that was way back, I think, in like 2020, I did it. And here I am, it's 2025 now, and I'm still harping about this one test as being the one that, did better for me than anything else.
Yeah. Awesome. Staying on the topic of certs, there is an ongoing debate about the necessity of certifications in cybersecurity, especially when you have so many to choose from. Do you have any advice on how people starting out with like absolutely 0 certs should craft a path through them forwards?
I think that if you asked me this 3 years ago, it would have been more geographically based. That said, I still think that the people who are going to do the best are the ones who are going to research those job openings and say, okay, I've looked at 20 job openings, 16 of them want this certification, 4 of them want this one, 2 of them want none, and et cetera. And mark those down and start trying to look first at what the employers expect. And 2, that networking aspect. Hey, you work at XYZ. Which of these certifications really, really matters? Do any of them matter? Does it matter which one I have? Is the OSCP like the gold standard here? Or do you care if I have, a GX certification? Or can I have the PMPT? Or can I have the Hack the Box, one of the Hack the Box certifications? And, pressure that network too to see what they say. That said, if you post on Twitter or LinkedIn which certification you think is the most valuable, I think you're going to get a whole bunch of fanboys and their little certification clicks. And you're going to get the offensive security crowd. You're going to get the TCM, Academy crowd. You're going to get the Hack the Box crowd. You're going to get the eLearn INE crowd. So it's really noisy out there and it's tough. So that's why I think just doing your own research first, looking at those job descriptions, seeing kind of where the trend is and draw from it from there. That said, there are those baseline certifications for knowledge where I think like Security Plus, I really think people should do that. I don't care what avenue of security you're going to get into, whether it's forensics, whether it's pen testing, whether it's application security, whatever it is, that's a good baseline. If you're going to do SOC work, like the CYSA is a good one to go into your interviews with that baseline, terminology. So you know kind of what the interviewer's talking about, right? Because if you go in blind, you might get that job if they're looking for folks who are, off the street. But if you're looking for ways to set yourself apart, walking in with some of that stuff attached can definitely be helpful.
Yeah, and that's another thing I think people forget is when you've got a job or your first job in cybersecurity, it's very likely not going to be pen tester. It can be for sure, but it's probably going to be more something like a SOC analyst or security architect of some kind, at a very junior position. And, from there, honestly, you're probably going to be moving upwards within the company, and your boss is probably going to be recommending certs, or there's, people on your team will be able to recommend certs. So I think, that's another where sort of networking is important as well. Just being able to talk to people about which certs have impacted their careers the most, I guess.
And it's funny you say that because pen tester was my first job in IT.
Yeah. It's a surprising one for a few people, but it's I don't know. This interview series has led me to many people who have started and just basically fallen into pen testing. I mean, it was my first role as well in cybersecurity. So but that was way back when you could just do that. I think it's definitely rarer these days. But there is certainly a path forward to it.
Yeah, it's definitely an exception and not the rule, but I don't recommend people go the path I did just because it was 40 hours a week and streaming nonstop and capture the flags nonstop and an uncomfortable amount of online networking during COVID, which was horrible. I met some really good people and made some good friends, to include you, during that time. But ever since getting that first pen test job, I have to research a lot more, as I was never a systems administrator. So when I run up against something new in Active Directory or Windows, networking, is this something I may or may not have known? Does it set me back? No, because I love researching and I work my butt off with it, but it does cost time.
Yeah. And I think one of the first times I actually encountered you online was when you would do those short 1 hour lunchtime streams on Twitch, solving short CTF challenges. Do you feel like streaming can help develop certain soft skills given you're presenting to an audience?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. Being able to talk with folks, you can tell if somebody is, very slang heavy or if they communicate well. You can see how they work under pressure. You can, there's a lot you can tell by looking at somebody on the other side of the camera, basically. So I think that there is a lot of benefit. A lot of the benefit that I think I was able to provide, though, that you as a streamer also provide, is showing people that we're normal. Right? Yeah, we struggle with it too. We get our butts kicked as well. We get stuck in those rabbit holes and we get as frustrated as you all do. So, there's a pedestal sometimes that folks get put on when they get on the camera and present themselves to the world where, wow, this guy's really good. What they don't see is the 2 hours you might spend before a stream sometimes, because I didn't go into every one of those streams completely blind to the challenge that day. I worked on it before, so I didn't want to look dumb, so to speak. But there was times where I said, "Hey, let's just go ahead and run one of these through blind," and the frustration would come out. So I think it's great. I also think it's great to help your public speaking posture, because a lot of what we do requires talking to people and talking in front of people, whether that's digitally or physically. And that's something that I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with. That they don't like talking in front of anybody, and being able to do that is definitely huge. And then seeing how somebody reacts under that pressure as an employer is really important. Yeah,
for sure. And I know for certain, I've spoken about it numerous times, including on this interview series, where I used to be terrible at public speaking, and I'm not claiming I'm amazing at it right now, but I think having streamed for 5 years now, just getting myself out there and talking to an audience has made me better at it.
Oh, sure.
And then, yeah, last year was literally my first, 2024 was the first time I actually gave proper talks at cons. So yeah, it was that was fun just because, it was completely new, and I was like, you know what, I think I've done enough streaming, I can do it in the real world now. But yeah, prior to that, I readout calls, scoping calls, where you're talking with customers, especially on readout calls, customers can get a little antagonistic. So you've got to know how to deal with that in a friendly manner and come across as, we're on your side. Yes, we've completely destroyed your application or your network, but we're here to help.
I know. You should recommend having a bunch of people who are developers come onto your stream and just harangue you for beating up random web apps. And then they just pretend that it's their application at that moment, because we've all had, clients who have definitely some of the best clients you've ever worked with. And then, for me, developers typically are the ones who take things most personal because it's their baby that you're beating up. So if you want to get really good at this, you just invite a bunch of developers over on your Twitch stream and have them roast you while you're doing it.
So soft skills are, I think we can both agree, quite an undervalued commodity by at least most candidates. And given that I imagine a large percentage of the industry is more introverted, how do you think people can best learn soft skills required to perform various roles in the industry? Because I feel like us streaming is, I'm an introvert. I know you're an introvert, but I feel like us streaming is kind of the exception, not the rule in that case.
Sure. Well, I mean, I was a mayor. I spoke at the Supreme Court back in 2018 in front of a crowd of hundreds of people. I would do that stuff because it was part of what I was doing. Same thing with the streaming thing. It's just, it's part of the job and the gig that I was attached to. But it can be taxing and draining. I'm sure you have plenty of streams where you're tapped out for the day. I'm like that at conferences, speaking at a conference, a 30-minute block, and I just want to go sit in a corner for a bit and just be left alone and to recuperate. When it comes to learning those skills, I mean, you don't have to get on camera to do it. Going and talking at small, B-sides conferences, or, sign up for Wild West Hacking Fest as a volunteer or something that gets you out in front of people to where they recognize you. You don't even have to be talking, for hours a day. You're not putting on a presentation at a trade show. Just communicating with people in general, introducing yourself to folks, I think is huge. And it's definitely part of that networking side that gets you in the door, but also expands upon those soft skills. Because again, these people you're talking to are the ones who may be on the interview panel that you're going to be sitting on for your next interview process. And they're going to say, hey, I remember this person, as they're taking 90 seconds before your interview. He spoke really well, or his technical acumen is second to none because I watch him stream, or whatever it might be. You might find yourself getting, an easy card when it comes to your interview, or slid into that second stack for a second interview before you even get the first one. There's just so many possibilities that come with putting yourself out there. And then honestly, just recuperate when you're done. Be like me and go sit in your corner and, don't cry, but sit in your corner and rest and relax a little bit and catch your breath.
Yeah, and I think especially when it comes to interviews, if you have interviewers who already know how you speak in a regular situation, one thing I think people get so nervous about is in an interview saying the wrong thing or coming across as being nervous. I mean, you're going to be nervous. It's an interview. I get nervous doing interviews still. And even if you come across completely introverted, nervous, shaking, whatever, stumbling over your words, that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if the person doing the interview knows that's not what you're normally like. Interviewers have done interviews. Interviewers know that everyone they're interviewing is going to be very nervous. So they will give you a little bit of slack. And especially if they know what you usually sound like, I feel like that's going to be working in your benefit.
Yeah, as a manager, I want to see how you talk, but from the perspective of, can I put you in front of a client? You'll get over the nerves with repetitiveness and doing it more and more. But I want to make sure you're not talking with slang words. I want to make sure you're not swearing when you talk. Those are things that are important to me, that you're respectful. There's not, call your interviewer sir or ma'am, or, whatever their pronoun, call them what they want to be and be respectful to them. I've called people that are younger than me who's been interviewing me sir, and they look at you like you're dumb, but it's like, hey, this is the military in me, but it's also the smart in me, right? Because I'm on this side of the table and you're on that side, and you deserve that respect. So don't forget your formalities. But, so I'm looking for things like that. Can I put this person in front of someone? I'll work your nerves out. Nerves are not an issue. That'll go away with time. But you can't teach people when they're adults how to not cuss when they're talking. You have to
Right.
be able to flip that switch on your own, and how to not use slang, or how to be able to, talk to somebody who doesn't know what acronyms are. Like, I'm the worst at acronyms. So for me, I never use them. And when somebody says them, I just cry. I'm like, oh God, which ABC does this mean? And I'm like Googling this stuff. So tangent time. But yeah, I just want to see how you talk normally. We can work your jitters out.
That's good advice. Really good advice. You have, I believe, 12 CVEs to your name, and you've been a proponent of newcomers using CVEs to boost their profile when applying to jobs. What is it about CVEs that you think can give candidates that extra sparkle?
Everyone knows what they are for the most part when they're getting into this space, whether you're in GRC, whether you're a systems administrator, a CISO, whatever it is you're doing. Those textbooks people are reading to get the CISSP or the CISM or whatever those management degrees are and management certificates are, they are seeing CVE because it's part of a section talking about vulnerability management. So everybody knows what they are. And a lot of people think that they're mystical, right? They're this, crazy mythical being that only the best of the brightest get, which there's some truth to that depending on what the findings are and some of the challenges that are being faced. But in general, for me, I think that it checks several boxes. One, it shows that you can take initiative on your own. If you're going out, you're looking for projects, that might be on GitHub and you're helping those folks out. You might be getting, some mom and pop shop that just really wants to provide a product and they don't have a lot of security. So it shows that you're community minded and community centric. Second, there's a communication process that goes on there between the tester or the person looking at the CV and the client or the developer or whoever the vendor is. So it tells me then as a manager, you're able to communicate with that person, and not just on a really low level, but also on a technical level, because you're not only telling their community service, hey, I found a vulnerability. You also have to talk to their developer. You also have to talk to their maintainer and say, hey, here's the technical details of this. You're also working with MITRE on some occasions, directly with that organization. So there's an additional communication aspect there. It shows that you're responsible when it comes to disclosure. You're not just, hey, look what I found. You're dumping it right on Twitter. You're finding it and you're showing a bit of constraint and holding your tongue and not telling the whole world, look what I did. This is really awesome. You're showing respect for vendors, respect for clients, and being able to work hand in hand with them on a disclosure process. So there's a lot there, not to include also like methodology, right? So when I tell people to go looking for CVEs and web apps, I'm telling them to pull up the web security testing guide from OWASP and just go down the list and use that, because when I'm interviewing you for something, I'm not just asking about cross-site scripting. I'm asking about, something that's, near the bottom. Hopefully it's not so crazy that nobody knows it. There's some things on that testing guide, like RIA testing or something. And hey, have you tested Adobe Flash? Anyone who was born in, since 2000 really doesn't know what Adobe Flash is anymore, but it shows that you're able to, to test to some sort of methodology. So I like it more than bug bounty, just because it really does have that community centric aspect to it. You're not just chasing cash. When I was doing it, I came up on the 100.dev platform, which was any GitHub repo. Now there was a monetary aspect there. It was a bug bounty program, but it was helping GitHub, repos, people who are doing this on the open source scene, who's doing it mostly for free. They since moved over to AI, which is fine if you want to, go work on some AI bugs on the 100 platform as well. But really, I just think that there's just so many positives. That said, again, economies of scale, the more CVEs there are held by people who are applying for jobs, the less value it has. So 5 years from now, I would definitely see it as being today's GitHub repo or blog advice, where yes, you have to have it. No, it probably doesn't provide much intrinsic value, despite, beyond, hey, you have this. So, if you're listening to this today, as you're coming up in the field, look for that next thing that might help somebody 5 years from now, because really I think that's where CVs are going to be. There's a lot of people doing that, which is great. I think it's wonderful, but the more somebody has of something, or the more people have of something, the less value it has.
Yeah, so true. Do you have a particular favorite CV that you found?
Yeah, so I have one with Mastodon, Chatwoot, and I think Zamad, all the same thing. These are all applications that use Ruby on Rails. And they all use, or used at that time, a library called Rack Attack, which prevents brute force attacks against API. I think I was testing Mastodon specifically, and I was just like screwing around with junk characters on the end of an API call. And I found that I was able to bypass rate limiting. And I said, what the heck's going on here? It was like .json or something that I added to the end of this API call and just threw it at an intruder. And like, I was just getting 200s on everything. I'm like, wow, what the heck's going on here? So one of the neat things about 100.dev platform back then was there was a code review aspect to it. So you not only were finding vulnerabilities, but you also had to suggest where in the code the vulnerability was at. And I was really bad at that part for a while. So it would take me a lot of time to find these things. But eventually I found it. There was a rule in default rack attack that basically said if the API endpoint was equal to versus contains. So if it was equal to, then the rack attack rules would take effect. Otherwise, they wouldn't. So for whatever reason, Ruby was processing the junk characters on the end of the API, again, for no idea why that was happening. But because it bypassed the rack attack rules, you could brute force it. So you're able to brute force. I think on Mastodon, I found that you could do the login form and like the forgotten password response. And then for Zamad, it was something like that. And Chatwood, it was everything. Their entire API was vulnerable. I got tired. Like there was probably 100 to 150 projects on GitHub I could have submitted that to. I made some quick cash off it. It was neat to do. Had some cool write-ups and kind of a, hey, look, I got a Mastodon CVE, which, people who are moving away from X or Twitter today to Mastodon's pretty, a neat little bragging point to say, I got a Mastodon CVE against their login portal. But it was rated, high nines, a lot of impact, something that had never been seen before. And it's a vulnerable default with rack attack. Watch your code.
That sounds amazing, actually. Yeah, that's a really fun. I think the best CV I have is just some XSS and I forget what it was. I think it was Access Cloud Suite or something. But yeah, it was way back in the day. Yeah, it was fine. Nothing like that there. That's really impressive.
It's not my most fun to chase down. I really like beating up like response discrepancies and timing discrepancies and whatnot because they're easy and quick. But yeah, the rack attack one probably the most impactful too. Just with the scale of users, Chatwood, I think that at the time there was like 20,000 stars on GitHub, and Zamad was something similar. Mastodon, we all know how large Mastodon is. So yeah.
Nice. You've created a number of hacking tools for your GitHub, which I'll link to in the video description. Are most of your tools created out of necessity, and what motivates you to develop them further and maintain them over time?
Sure. So boredom and curiosity more than necessity, I think. O365 User Finder, which is probably my most popular one, is my O365 password spraying tool. I rewrote that originally because I had done the Azure course from Nikhil Mitt over at Altered Security, and he was using a tool still that was written in Python 2. So O365 User Finder originally was just written as a user enumeration tool, just ported over to Python 3. And I got bored. And I'm like, well, what would this take me to write it over into password spraying instead? So I spun Burp up. I started capturing requests and responses and seeing what those look like. And just over time built that out. Again, lots of boredom, lots of... there's a lot of time sometimes between pen tests or while you're on pen tests. Sometimes tools might not work, something you grab and you're like, hey, old trusty here will keep working because it's something that I have built. And when it doesn't work, I know that I'll fix it right away. I don't have to put a pull request in and hope that this repository is still maintained. Recently, I've been working a lot on some cloud tools on the AWS side, just because I'm learning AWS currently just on my own. And so I wrote a S3 enumeration and file download tool. That was just kind of wanting to learn more about Bodo 3 and how Amazon's API works. In terms of my newest one for enumerating users and password spraying AWS's console, that's kind of... you worked at White Oak, if I'm not mistaken, didn't you? Mm-hmm. They have a spraying tool written in Go. I don't like Go, so I figured out how to write one in Python instead. So there's a certain person, a trash puppy, if they watch this, they'll know I don't like Go.
So she doesn't like Python, but we do, so that's exactly fine.
This is why we do it. But, that tool, while it's good, it relies on Go. I like running stuff from Windows. So I really just, if I see something that's in a different language, I'm not going to sit there and copy it by any means or go through the tool and say, okay, this is exactly how they did that. I'll say, hey, how can I figure out how to do this in Python? So literally taught myself Bodo 3 for the most part over like the last 2.5 months, just tinkering around. So for me, it's curiosity. Again, going back to the career prospect of it, if you write tools that are really, really beneficial to the field, I think you're going to get a lot of fanfare and you'll get a lot of attention. Writing things that just have 1 star on GitHub where you're not self-promoting it, you're not pushing that tool, you're not trying to get people to use it or understand it, checks the resume bullet checkbox for you, I think. For me, it's one of those things where it's less value for me on the career prospects anymore. It's just what can I make easier for myself by spending 120 hours writing at first, right? So you think about the amount of time you've put into it. It's like, did this really make my life easier? And I have no idea, but I learned something cool along the way, which in the end, that's what it is for me, is just, I love learning and learning new things and seeing how things work. So for me, that's where the value is.
Nice. Yeah. And I've often told people, like, you can just start writing a tool. If you see a tool that's or you use a tool that's old and hasn't been updated, there's no reason why not just go and create your own version just for fun. And and that's literally how Auto Recon, my own tool, sort of exploded. Like, there were tools that did stuff that Auto Recon did. I liked using 3 of them, and I was like, why am I using 3 of them for all different purposes? I could just combine them into one big tool that did everything. And turns out people like that. But yeah, like, I learned so much writing, not necessarily Auto Recon 1, but the second version, the rewrite, just about how Python, how you can basically dynamically create so many things in Python at runtime, and creating entire plugins. I honestly would recommend, whatever language you like using, try and implement a plugin system for it, where you basically read static files at runtime that can effectively morph your code in some way, because it's harder than a lot of people think.
No,
and
it's difficult.
Yeah. People already think it's hard. It's harder than that, is what I'm trying to say. So Auto Recon does that, and I had to kind of like hack apart how Python objects work and learn a lot about that. So I think in certain areas, you just learn a load of stuff via programming, even when the project didn't initially seem like it would teach you much.
Yeah. I wrote an entire book on creating a C2 because I wanted to learn more about Python requests. And it devolved into a 250-page book.
Awesome. We'll link that book below as well.
Yeah, I'll take their money.
So, as someone involved in the education of the next generation of cybersecurity with your own courses, the book you just mentioned, obviously your work at TCM, do you have a favorite success story from a student that you can share?
I don't know if it's a student specifically, but mentorship for sure. Michael Padrick, he's the pool guy to pen tester story, right?
Yeah.
He calls himself fearless online. He's a great friend of mine. He's proof that with just a little bit of push on his own and a little bit of mentorship and just guidance, that he can really become something amazing. He does great work where he's at, and I am by no means, and he'll disagree with you, or he'll disagree with me, but I am by no means the reason for his success. But, being able to just talk to somebody and provide some time to them and a little bit of, mentorship and guidance, for me, that's where the bulk of my success has come from, and the, bulk of my success stories has come from. When it comes to folks, the CVE talk that I've given, if we're looking for something very specific, that talk I've had more people come to me and say they got jobs because of than anything else I've done. And I've seen, if we're trying to assign a monetary value to it, I mean, you're talking about people's livelihoods changing because they watched a 20-minute presentation, decided to give it a whirl, and then, get in front of an interviewer, and the first thing they're doing is explaining how they got a CVE, and that's, winning an interview over. So I don't want to gloat much, but for me, that's kind of an ego moment to say, wow, this one thing, literally, I was just bored one night, and it's called, I was bored one night and found 2 CVEs as the talk. Literally just bored, trying to think of ways to help people out, with getting over that initial hump, with getting into the field, and to see that, people's lives have changed because of that is huge.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely something to boast about. So it's always great when you have people come to you and say that you affected them personally and in such an amazing way. So yeah, I mean, absolutely feel great about that, dude. That's amazing. And I've seen that talk. That's a talk you've been giving for years now, and I saw it last year at HackSpaceCon.
Yep.
And yeah, it was great. Like, you went into so much detail about the entire process, and how you went from just literally one night finding 2 CVs to this entire process and methodology and teaching yourself and learning and how it can help affect others. So yeah, really good talk. If you're still giving it a cons, I would definitely recommend going to see Joe's talk.
I submitted it a couple places last year, got turned down. I was kind of disappointed, but we'll find another way to do it. I think, like I said, hunter.dev is pushed over on the AI space pretty hard. So if we do like a version 3 of it, it'll probably be more on the AI space. It's the Wild West right now. Like everything over there is deployed vulnerable by default just because it's so first to market with all these projects that security is just taking a back seat.
Interesting you should mention AI because that is my final question. With the rise of AI, how do you see the cybersecurity threat landscape changing? And do you think that aspiring professionals should be studying AI for that purpose?
I think the landscape changes from who you can trust and who you can't trust, right? There's always been a knowledge gap with our field. People, for us, we've been able to Google things for the last 15 years or more and have those answers at our fingertips with some effort. Nowadays, you're pretty much able to say, hey, Grok, or hey, ChatGPT, churn out this entire coded solution for me. And with a couple of tweaks, it will do exactly what you want it to, or it will answer the exact question you're looking for. I will say this. I think that people should leverage what they can to be efficient while leveraging knowledge to stay proficient. So we really need to stay proficient at what we do because you may be on that network where you're locked down tight. If you're on, a U.S. military, installation doing testing, you may absolutely not have access with their CyberNet network to ChatGPT. And you may be, your phone could be in a bag, locked in a locker somewhere, and you're hooked on their network and you have no access to any of that stuff. You need to be prepared for that with whatever position you go into. And if you've come into that position solely relying on going to ChatGPT and saying, hey, give me the answer to this, your employer is quickly going to know whether or not you're worth your salt. So I think being able to leverage the tools you have while making sure that you stay proficient at what you do really needs to be where our mindset is with that.
Yeah, great answer. 100% agree. That's the end of the interview. Joe, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can people find and follow you online?
People can find me hiding. I'm on Twitter at Joe Helle, LinkedIn, I think joe.helle, if I'm not mistaken. You can check out the mayor.tech as well. It's my website. It's got all my little notes and things I've accumulated over the course of 5 years. And then soon I'll be able to tell everybody where I'm working at next. So looking forward to that starting here in another week.
Hey, excellent. Congrats. Thank you so much again for sharing your knowledge and experience with all of us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.